As a sliver of cold moonlight in a 1744 St. Petersburg midnight slanted across the frost-laden marble window frames of the Winter Palace, the air was steeped in the faint scent of amber and the bittersweet aroma of ancient pine scorched by the hearth. Within a side chamber shrouded by heavy velvet curtains, where the distant cracking of the Neva's ice could be heard, a woman with a slender face and eyes reflecting a profound sense of universal desolation sat quietly, opening her empty hands. She was not awaiting a greeting from her temperamental newlywed husband Peter. Instead, within the sanctuary of her mind, she was deducing the definition of reason. She was Catherine the Great, the German girl Sophie who had arrived in Russia possessing nothing but her formidable intellect. This is a chronicle of how restraint bursts with power, and how desolation is transmutated into splendor. The genesis of Catherine the Great's life held none of the typical imperial heir's brilliance. Instead, it was a dark foundation woven from the pride of fallen nobility and rigorous French education within the quiet German principality of Anhalt-Zerbst. As a girl pathologically sensitive to the intellectual world, she learned to capture every metaphor of fate within the pages of history of Greece. She once walked barefoot in freezing corridors at midnight just to maintain the sharp clarity needed to practice her Russian vocabulary. This near-obsessive pursuit of logic and power became the singular armor that allowed her to safeguard her truth in a turbulent world. She understood that true dignity was not endowed by bloodline, but through a sacred logic grown naturally from an ultimate respect for language, rules, and the intricacies of humanity. If her early travels were a sacrifice of courage, then the 18 years spent in the shadow of Empress Elizabeth were the practical crucible that pushed Catherine's aesthetics of endurance to its absolute zenith. In those quiet nights where only the rhythm of the Neva's waves hitting the stony shore could be heard, she issued silent commands of self-reconstruction through the ruthlessly precise dissection of Russian law. She invented a technique of growth called breakthrough via the study, giving a dull, restricted life an intellectual tension as precise as a sonnet. In that moment, Catherine was the most sober and steady artisan in all of Northern Europe, accepting every malicious taunt from the outside world with silence. This radical focus rendered her like a marble bell tower, solitary yet indestructible. The summit of power in the eyes of the wise is often manifested as the penetration of truth. Catherine realized as she donned the green uniform of the guards during that world-shaking coup that what she gained was a void born of seeing through the rise and fall of empires. She discovered that those grand imperial ideals, once seemingly invincible, possessed a profound fragility in the face of the frozen Siberian wilderness. In a letter to Diderot she mused, "I used to think I was writing history, now I find I am merely searching for a point of convergence within the scarred fissures of marble, where the soul no longer falls." This expansive clarity became the hardest armor of her final hours, allowing her to face the fires at the border with a serenity as quiet as snow falling upon the Neva. The final season of Catherine the Great was spent in a state of profound solemnity and a silence illuminated by the radiance of a sage. At the dawn of November 1796, the fine rain in St. Petersburg fell soundlessly. By then, the Empress's body had become remarkably heavy from years of toil. In her final conscious moments, she requested to be carried to the window to look upon the grey mists lingering over the Winter Palace gardens one last time. She closed her eyes and, with those hands that had mastered 10,000 scepters of power, traced a final arc of completion across her chest. The northern wind carried away the last sigh of this great genius, marking the formal end of that era of Russian civilization known as the intellectual dawn in a steady fading echo. The saga of Catherine thus draws to a slow close amidst the fading dusk of St. Petersburg. She was never a political opportunist bartering for fame, she was merely a weary soul who steadfastly refused to compromise with mediocrity. She reminds us that no matter how mundane or fragmented your life may be, inner tranquility is your only true and eternal refuge. Just as she sat through the coldest winter nights in the Winter Palace, clutching a guttering candle to find a fulcrum for existence within the void through the tip of her pen. Believe that every life has its own Winter Palace midnight. A private space for dialogue with the self that requires no outward explanation. May the serenity of Catherine become the softest feather in your dreams, carrying you toward that most peaceful and expansive shore of the inner soul. Good night.